Welcome to MetaPod, the podcast where we discuss operational execs and organizations that make and move stuff, and our common headaches, digital transformation, the forever labor shortage, and doing more with less. And now, the host of MetaPod, Ron Crabtree.
It's Ron Crabtree here, your host of MetaPod, and I'm back here now to pick up this topic around digital transformation as one of those three key challenges every organization faces. And one of the key areas every business is involved with is supply chain, and in particular, logistics and transportation. In a moment, I'm going to ask Derek Browning with Uber Freight Company to introduce himself and talk a little bit about his background. But to be clear here, we're going to start with three diagnostics. You know, what Derek would say is probably for any organization with a large-scale logistics and transportation operation, or maybe you manage 3PLs, or use or consume a lot of logistics services, these will all be wonderful tips for you and great questions to ask. So we're going to start with some diagnostics. If you're an executive, doesn't know a whole lot about it, and you're going to walk down the hall and kind of determine if there's opportunities or challenges around digital transformation associated with future supply chain, that's the logistics and transportation in particular, what kinds of questions should we ask? How can we diagnose if we really have a problem? And then we're going to pivot and talk about the practical advice that Derek can offer around what do you do if, yes, in fact, you discover that these are challenges we need to address going forward. So with that, Derek, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. So Derek Browning here. I'm a director of consulting with Uber Freight and have been consulting in supply chain for the greater part of 2 decades. So I've seen a lot of organizations go through digital transformations and layering in more and more technology over the years. But we've also worked inside of organizations that are highly manual. And one of my favorite supply chain stories, working with an organization that was running an old Cobalt system that they were struggling to find people to maintain it in their work. So I've had the privilege of working in a lot of different scenarios and seeing organizations along their journey.
All right, very good. So let's go ahead and get going then on the diagnostic. And I'll let you tackle that any way you want. There's like 3 core areas that you had identified. And why don't we just pick those apart, minding that our audience may not know a whole lot of the technical jargon. So we want to kind of define carefully what do you mean by these certain things as you roll that out.
Yeah, I saw a commercial the other day, and it was saying how organizations have evolved in their sales pitches, and it showed, you know, a day and a time when organizations were talking about their competency and their quality, and in modern day it's now the salesperson saying, hey, here's what we're doing with AI, because AI is such a new and exciting thing. So as we're thinking about artificial intelligence and technology as it differentiates one supply chain for another, 3 of the things that I like to look for. One is excessive manual processes. These are processes that are done multiple times a day. They're done by multiple people in the organization, probably in different ways at every desk and at every place in the organization. And they're just done manually. So they're prone to a lot of mistakes and gaps and extra effort. Additionally to manual processes, I look for organizations with multiple systems in operation with minimal integration. And so usually those manual processes will be connectors between systems. And so we may run a warehouse management system or a transportation management system. I'll often say WMS or TMS. And the organization will run these, but they'll run these after pulling information or data out of an ERP and uploading it or sending a file over to another system. So there will be multiple systems in place with very little integration. And then the third kind of diagnostic criteria that I think about is an organization that just has zero curiosity about artificial intelligence. And so there's a lot of hype around the topic right now, and because of all that hype, you can have some organizations that may be just waiting and seeing, and well, let's give this another 10, 20 years, and then we'll come back and decide whether or not it's important. And I fear that those organizations, by the time that they realize how important it is, if they've not layered in their curiosity and invested in the right places, they will be left behind.
All right. Let's go back now, get into some nitty-gritty details, right? For the uninitiated or not familiar with what do we mean by manual processes. Yeah, give us a little deeper dive there with some specificity that I should be looking for as an executive.
Yeah, maybe just kind of a few examples. I think across the supply chain, we can have organizations that when they're running their order management processes or order management systems, they may have manual allocations of product. And so that means that, hey, we've got orders for 300,000 pieces of this product, but we only have 200,000 in stock. Who gets what? And then there's an internal debate across sales channels and customer service, and it ends up slowing down the overall process. So things like allocations or order assignments. Additionally, inside of a facility, things like pick waves and releases, they can be very manual and
yeah. So what do you mean by a pick wave? That's
so
fancy jargon. People go, pick wave? What do you mean by that?
Inside of the four walls of a warehouse, most warehouse management systems will aggregate orders, and then you will drop those orders to the floor to get picked, and they will do some level of batching so that work can be assigned in a thoughtful manner. So we can send one person to one area, a warehouse, only once, as opposed to sending them to that same area of the warehouse multiple times a day. So they'll try to batch that, and there's a bit of a balance between how frequent you'll batch that to get productivity improvement versus how frequent you release it to the floor to be picked so that you can get velocity in the facility. And so those pick waves in an environment where you've got a supervisor that's running out and solving problems on the dock and then coming back when work starts to queue up and people start to stand still and says, let me send out some more orders. That's a manual release of orders to the floor, manual wave planning. And we like to see a more thoughtful approach to how order and work's released to the floor in an automated environment. I think a third one in the transportation world is how we run optimization and tendering processes. There's still organizations out there doing this by phone or fax or the old-fashioned, hey, I've got a load. Let me send it to 50 different brokers on my email and let them kind of have at it, and they're going to respond back with 30 different emails, and after a period of time, I just pick the one that looks like the lowest if I've managed my inbox correctly.
So that would be what the allocation. I'm sorry, that's what the tendering is all about.
Yeah,
it's working down through who's actually going to get that order to make the move. So as the uninitiative executive, I'm trying to understand, are those manual processes, or are they highly automated with lots of intelligent decision support behind them? And if you can't clearly see the answer to that, then there's probably a gap.
And there's a lot of those processes inside a supply chain where, for a good purpose at some point in the past, they were done manual. But the technology has evolved over the years to be able to simulate all of the thinking and decision making that the folks doing the work are doing anyway. So it's if we're able to apply the right technology there, it can free those people up to do more thoughtful work.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next section. What are we looking for specifically to give us evidence around, disparate systems perhaps needing integration?
Yeah. So when we've got disparate systems, there tends to be a lot of manual movement of data back and forth. So people with actual assignments to upload data or download from one system, manipulate it, and then load it into another system. And so there's a lot of that manual back and forth. We also see a lot of system redundancies. So there will be multiple WMSs or TMSs, and they're performing maybe different tasks in different systems, and then a high use of Excel. And I'm a huge fan of Excel. I've used it my whole career. I've even ran into organizations running their entire supply chain off of Excels and macros. And it causes you to kind of chuckle when that happens, because there's a lot of opportunity to automate things outside of Excel and supply chain, and the industry has evolved over the years. So looking for those system redundancies in that way, and then additional layers of protection or backup around the order systems. So if oftentimes what you'll see is, hey, we've got an old system in place, and we either have one of two problems. One, we've got additional layers of protection, so backup upon backup upon backup, and manual processes that are in place to protect ourselves against a system issue, or the even worse scenario is we don't have anything in place, and so we're just waiting for that one system that is under supported to go down, and then our entire supply chain is at risk.
What? Awesome. So I think that takes us into that whole curiosity around AI, doesn't it?
Yeah. And there I like to see the level of curiosity that an organization has and what degree of testing or experimentation they've been doing. So if they've got a high degree of skepticism, which some level of skepticism is appropriate, you want to protect your supply chain, you want to make sure you've got a robust application of a new technology and a level of understanding and how it works and what decisions. When you're turning over your orders to a technology and you're not really sure how it works or why it's making the decisions that it's making, that there is a level of discomfort that is appropriate. But if your level of skepticism has you to the point where you're not even interested in experimentation, then you're going to be behind on the learning curve, and the learning curve's moving fast. So if there's a lot of wait and see, I want to see what others in the industry are doing. Once those others in the industry, if they're applying the right process to the selection, once they get it into place, they're going to be light years ahead of you. So you need to make sure that there's some healthy level of curiosity, or in the event that there's just a myopic strategy. So we've got one technology that's been selected or investigated, and all of our future hope and promises are on this one technology and the roadmap that their sales team is putting in front of us.
Could be trouble, because rarely is it a one-dimensional solution. There typically are lots of moving pieces that have to be considered. So I feel like you did a pretty good job there. So I'm walking down the hall and I'm just looking for some evidence, right? Help show me what we're doing. One of the things you probably would suggest is just try to get a gauge for how much time do the people spend doing manual tasks, repetitive tasks, handling of information, searching for the information, decision-making that's kind of blocking and tackling and day by day the same thing over and over versus the critical thinking, getting ahead of it. What's the right ratio? If you see what percentage of time being spent doing manual related stuff would say you've got a problem. 10%, 100%, 90%?
No, I think
does it depend?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And one of the challenges with that is when you think about automated tasks, what percent of a person's time should be doing an automated task? The answer is 0. Because if it's truly automated, the person's not going to be doing anything for the task. Now, the ratio around, how much time should someone spend firefighting versus proactive problem solving is probably a better question, because when these automated systems are up and running, it's never a situation where hands are off. There's some level of manual manipulation, manual improvement, manual engagement. And so as an executive, I'm going to be wanting to see that my folks in the organization have their processes mapped out. They know where their gaps are in their processes. There's areas of their processes where they're applying technology. There's other areas where they're still investigating how to apply technology. And really they're not caught up where 100% of their time is just firefighting.
Let's stop there, because you just brought up something really important. In fact, let's just pivot a little bit, go into that. What would you do, right? So you've looked at it, you realize you have gaps or are likely to have gaps coming up if you don't already. What do you do? And you just talked about something very important, is mapping.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you map? Why are you mapping it? And what do I want to learn, right? What's the data and information that we want to learn? If we're going to go look at the processes to evaluate them.
Yeah. You'll see me show my Lean Six Sigma background here. When I'm talking mapping, I'm a huge fan of swim lane maps, of value stream maps, and And oftentimes we'll do what we've called a visibility map, where we layer in the material information flow aspects of a value stream map. So we're mapping out all the information flow for a supply chain. We're mapping out all the material and product flow for the supply chain. We're also coming in with the key metrics and KPIs of the supply chain, and then layering in some of that, Six Sigma process mapping. What are the critical inputs and outputs of these major steps in this process? What decisions need to be made? What inputs are required for the decisions to be made? And so if you have all of that together in kind of one map, it's going to be a bit complex, but it helps the team align on what's actually happening. And just the fact that a team is doing the mapping, current state, future state exercise, it means that they're thinking about the process that they're operating, and they're looking for opportunities to improve it. They're not just lost in the process that they're operating.
Well, I know you've been through a lot of these mapping exercises, as have I, for that matter, and I've always been a big fan of, identify all the IT systems and technology tools we could use in the process of this end-to-end process, and actually trying to capture that in some kind of a matrix so you can go back later and say, well, we're not using, 2 pieces of technology, there's 40. Once you start taking in third-party applications, having to go out and search for things on a third-party network, the Excel spreadsheets, the ad hoc, workarounds, workflows, blah, 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 we'll start to find out there's a lot of layers of complexity to what we're doing. And how do you separate the important from the unimportant? Do you also look for failure rates, first-time capability of the process, where things tend to break? What are you digging for to really understand?
Yeah, in that mapping exercise, it's a good blend of hearing the voice of the process, where the people running the process can let us know, how things are running, where things are gapped, but also the ability to query data and understand from a data standpoint, where are the failure points, where are we seeing gaps. The complexity of things has always been an interesting conversation, because with the rise in technology and the ability for things like AI to create and execute a level of complexity that 10, 15 years ago we only hoped for, our supply chains will get more complex. The question is whether or not it's intentional. And so for us as an organization to, we're thinking about our customers, for our customers as an organization to have a level of complexity that they don't want, or that is unintentional, that's where we see the problem. And so mapping out a full process and understanding the level of complexity, you can ask the question, the old Lean Six Sigma, is it value add? Is this the kind of complexity we want? Is this, if these are 40 systems, but all 40 are best in class and they're integrated well and they're operating as a well-humming machine, that might be the right answer. But if it's 40 systems, 10 of them are best in class, the other 30 are redundant and end up creating confusion, then we've got a different kind of answer situation than what we're looking at.
Thank you. Thank you for expanding on that. All right, cool. Let's see here. What else might we do around fixing those manual processes?
Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah. Once you got some mapping in place, we're seeing a good use of process robots. So there are software technologies out there where you can have a robot watch you execute a process time and time again, and then it gets to a point where it'll execute it for you. And that once it's able to execute it for you, it can run it, and it's a very simple, quick automation of what some manual process can be. And then what that does, that frees up talent so that that talent can take what they know about your business and then apply it into deeper thinking and to more creative problem solving. So they're actually solving problems in the supply chain so that they can take your supply chain to the next level, as opposed to just the firefighting, day-to-day firefighting of just getting through the day.
Okay. All right, cool. What else? Anything else around the manual processes before we pivot?
Yeah, no, I think it's a natural transition as you think about the manual processes. A lot of those existing between the disparate systems. So in terms of those disparate systems, what we're seeing in the industry right now is to solve that problem, and is we see a rise of what they call HIP layers or hybrid integration platforms. And so these are softwares or technologies that will have a one-to-many type relationship. So if you've got multiple ERPs and you're in the process of changing your ERPs, while at the same time you're in the process of changing some of the technologies, the execution systems that might tie into the ERP, you can put in one of those integration platform layers so that everything becomes modular. And then you can have that modular change of one system to another and another to another. And all the while your whole ecosystem is able to function at an optimal level, and you don't have to have a excessive amount of integration with every new technology that you change.
All right, so that whole pain around application interface layers and all the agony associated with that isn't really needed if you've got those smart intermediary tools, right, to condition and move the data, look for problems, stop it when it's obviously no good, not passing bad data, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and there's several ways to architect one of those networks, but the reason behind it is when you look at how fast technology is evolving, and today's a lot of the large providers are trying to be an all-in-one. So your large technology provider, they want you to be able to buy their software and it do everything your supply chain needs. The reality though is that those providers are really good at 1, 2, maybe 3 things, and not so good at the others. And so if we're running an optimal supply chain, we're going to have a best-in-class provider for each mode or each part of the supply chain. And so because that best-in-class provider over a matter of 5 years may change. And so as some of these organizations have additional layers of investment from the outside or from retained earnings, versus others that, hey, they have an ownership structure that tries to take cash out of it, they're not going to be in a situation where they continue to invest at the same pace as what others might. And so the need to be able to pivot from one provider to another that may not be keeping up with where the network's going really requires a layer of integration flexibility to enable the modularity of supply chains.
In other words, don't get married to one provider. Be open to and constantly vigilant for what's changing, and what needs to adapt, right? As the nature of what we need to do changes.
Yeah, and shoot for best in class for the problem you're trying to solve. And so it's showing a tad bit of bias. The Uber Freight TMS, really strong TMS capability. And would fit in as a best-in-class and work alongside of other best-in-class solutions in warehousing or inventory planning and other areas like that. So we would advocate utilize the TMS as the best-in-class solution for the problem that you've got, and not just settle for a solution that's packaged up with 6 other different versions.
Okay, right. So what else do we want to do to tackle disparate systems, or do we now pivot on to the AI curiosity thing?
Yeah, I think the one thing is probably the hardest to do when you've got so many systems going on is the sunsetting. And I think about, some of my interactions with S&OP folks, the
sales, inventory, and operations planning community, right?
Yeah, they complain about the merchandising group or the sales group always wanting to add new SKUs, but never wanting to take one away because they want to be able to sell everything. And similar type activity happens in technology where we've got an affinity for new technology and onboarding new technology and getting new stuff into the system. But when it comes time to sunsetting and consolidating systems, that becomes, that's a bit of a challenge. So we want to push past that, identify those systems that are archaic or that create a level of risk to our supply chain, and we'll have to spend some level of effort on sunsetting those systems so that we can upgrade the overall platform as a whole.
Okay, cool. All right, well, let's pivot then, I think, to the third advice area, all around this curiosity about AI and emerging technologies. So what's your advice? What do we do?
Yeah, no, it's let's go turn everything over to robots tomorrow. No, there's a reality that's going on right at the moment, and I think I'll probably look back at this podcast in another 10 years and laugh at my comments, because so much is changing so fast. But the reality of it is there's a lot of money and activity and work going into AI. And it is a solution that can solve some pretty complex problems, but we're still not sure of all the problems that can be solved by it. And so as you're thinking about your supply chain and the areas of your supply chain that may need some support, first thing is you always want to investigate before investing. And so you don't want to just throw a bunch of money and spend a few $1 million on a new system in hopes that it's going to solve your problems. You want to familiarize yourselves with the operating systems, the language models, the co-pilot options, get application case studies in place, so that you got a good read on what parts of your network, what parts of your supply chain is going to benefit from AI, what are the limits of AI or the risks of AI, and then as it's evolving, that we have a right estimate of it. We don't underestimate it for the applications that it's going to fit well, or we don't overestimate it for the applications that it may still be a bit challenging to implement and throw in place. So along with that, we want to partner with providers that are investing. And so you want to identify those partners that recognize its importance. They're on the learning curve and they're investing and they're building the future of their technology and their system with AI in mind. And then thirdly, I recommend hedging your bets. So if you think about all of the modularity and supply chain that's existing, as we think about AI technologies, we're investigating in different solution stacks. So we may have a couple of AI providers that can provide different looks as to how we might manage our inventory levels. And we've got one that does well at planning, one that does well at execution. And so those might be a couple of different providers that will roll into a supply chain. But we're doing so with a couple of other providers that do similar type activities alongside of them, or so that if we need to transition or pivot at some point, we can, especially in the early stages with a lot of this technology. It's, we're still the concept of AI hallucination is a funny one, where some of these AI systems will just make up a solution or make up an answer, and we're not able to even trace back and understand where it came from or why it came in that way. And so a lot of the providers that are in beta versions or early stage, they're debugging it and minimizing the number of hallucinations that can take place. And so you want to partner with those providers that really understand how they're applying it in the right places, and then hedging your bets to make sure that in the early stages, you've got the ability to pivot.
Yeah, because the one constant in business is change,
mm-hmm.
but it's accelerating because, you got legislation being passed, the compliance requirements are shifting on us. Suddenly, we have new taxation, we have new tariffs, we have all these things continually changing, and those impact decision support and how we handle and work with the data. And it's getting harder, not easier, every day of the week.
Yeah, no, it's the old saying. I guess I say old in the last few years. The AI isn't going to replace or eliminate jobs. What it's going to do is change jobs, so that those future jobs are going to be jobs that know how to use AI in the right places within the work that they're doing.
Or humanizing the output,
mm-hmm.
The way of thinking about it. But Derek, this has been awesome, and you've just kind of scratched the surface on some pretty complex topics. if somebody out there wanted to talk more with you, ask you some follow-on questions, dig a little deeper, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me. Just send me an email at derek.browning@uberfreight.com and we can set up time to chat. Always excited to talk about supply chain activities and problem solving within the supply chain.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Ron.
Thank you for joining MetaPod. For requests on topics or to ask questions, you can connect with Ron Crabtree 3 ways: via email at metapod@metaexperts.com, via LinkedIn, or by calling him directly at 734-425-1455, extension 103. Lastly, if you love the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. We truly appreciate all your support.